Howdy again, it's Mr. Pete, your worn out interweb shop teacher, and this is tips number 854, which is part 2 of a two-part video, and this one's entitled Assembling, or should I say reassembling, the wide range South Bend quick change gearbox. Now, make sure you have watched part 1, or you may not understand what I'm doing here, and it's been about 10 days since I did part 1, and during that time, I've been busy as a bee, cleaning things up. I did a little painting, I did a little repair and so on that was not worthy of being filmed. So let's get on with this, but I will have to cut some of this out as well because it's going to be a terribly long video. I would suggest that you do not try this at home. It isn't particularly easy to do this. And I'm sure I will struggle trying to get these gears back into place because it's just such a tight quarters, but it's been kind of fun. So let's begin, and be sure and watch the whole thing, and it's going to be very, very long. There will be extra credit. There's a few things like the painting of this, I think, that I'll put in extra credit because you don't really want to see that unless you're really a detail type person. So let's start. Okay, I'd like to recap a little bit of what we've done here off camera and in part 1. Again, this was donated to me by one Mr. Michael Yarmarkov. Thank you to him, or I would not be able to do this. And again, this is the 70 speed, or the 70 gear transmission, not the 48 that most of you probably have, but these were used on the 10-inch heavy over the years, so there probably were a lot of these made. I don't think it's particularly rare. At first I thought it was rare, but I don't believe it is. You can see it's been painted several colors. I don't know what the original color was, but I have cleaned this. It may not look good to you, but it has been cleaned thoroughly, degreased, and all of that. And I know the plate is a little bit banged up, but very usable. And later on, this may get painted, but probably off camera, maybe not even in this particular video. But I have cleaned and painted and primed the inside. And doesn't that look nice? Again, there'll be a little footage on that near the end. Why did I paint that? Nobody's going to see it. I don't know. I do like that color. That's Rust-Oleum primer is what it is. But again, I have removed all the gears in the other video, and they've all been cleaned as best I could do, and most of them are in pretty good condition. None of them are missing teeth like I am. However, there are some damaged teeth, worn teeth, and so on. Now, I have kept everything in order. I know I got it laying loose here, but even with these gears in the Christmas tree cluster here, I did not want them flipped like that, or they may not work. To me, you need to keep things in the original order. Maybe I'm foolish in telling you that, but I did mark these, but I didn't stamp them. I used the engraver. Let me show you that. You probably remember this. It's an etcher, not an engraver. I used the incorrect word, but you probably saw when I bought this at an auction or a garage sale some time ago. There's a video on that, and it's electrical, and this is what it looks like. And what I like about this, it doesn't raise the surface as it would if you were typically using a letter stamp. You know, that just raises it, and then maybe the gears wouldn't fit together, and maybe they're too hard to stamp. So that's what I used. Who cares? But it will help me reassemble it. Just to show you what I mean by damage to some of the gears, can you see these teeth right here? I mean, they're usable, but they're burred over a little bit. Now, I have taken a file and dressed any gears that needed it, but this one I haven't done yet. But we have damage like that on quite a few gears, but there's nothing we can do about it other than replace the gears, and these would not be available new anyway, and if they were, they would be prohibitively expensive. And I cleaned all of these using thinner and a toothbrush. This is a toothbrush for cleaning teeth. However, my wife uses this on her teeth, and I've had another argument with her because she's using these soft bristles and I really need the harder bristles. So I'm going to get her to change the Oral-B, whatever the heck it is here. I used to like these, but from the freight store out in the bay, the brass ones have a life of about 3 or 4 minutes before they look like this. So these are bordering on the useless. So that's what I've done here with the gears, and the main thing is I cleaned them up and inspected them. Now regarding the tumblers, I did paint these, the part that will stick out. I don't care about it down here, neither did they when they painted it. So, and that was just one coat. It didn't cover very well. I may touch it up again later if I care. And I did not take the tumbler out, however, I lubricated them because they are in perfect condition, and I cleaned up the knurls, which were a little bit rusty, so these are ready to assemble with their mating gears, and that's one of the first things that I will be doing. So in examining the shafts, and this is a hard shaft, there are scores and little grooves, but it is usable. I would hate to think of remaking one of these because it's got a keyway on both sides. And then let's take a look at this one. Isn't real good. You can see where it's worn. Now this is a wick, and I'll be talking more about that later on. Little bit of wear there, but it's perfect here on the ends. And finally this one, quite a bit of wear, but I don't think that'll hurt the functionality one bit. These are standard dowel pins, and if they were worn, they would be very easy to replace. This casting has a lubrication system I think that is very interesting, so I'm going to take 2 minutes or more to talk about that, but this rib here, or boss, whatever you want to call it, isn't for strengthening the casting. It is an oil gallery, and looking at it from this side, there are 2 Gitz oilers right here, and I have removed, this one was busted, so I took that out, and I will replace it later on with this one, which I had to modify. I thought I had some, but I did not. But they both go into the same gallery, so I don't know why they didn't put just one in the middle, but I believe that that channel or gallery is also meant as a reservoir to hold excess oil that will then slowly feed into the moving parts and bearings with wicks, so it doesn't just fall right through by gravity. But looking at the end here, at both ends there was a cap, and I have removed the caps. They're nothing more than little sheet metal discs. I drilled a hole in it and popped them out. They are not reusable. I've made new ones, which I will be showing you later on. And then I'm still mad at my wife. Boy, you know, I think we're in for a trial separation here. So I send her to Walmart. Well, she goes to Walmart. And I said, get me some of those pipe cleaners. You'll find them, I think, back, you know, where they sell all the Sims supplies, and tobacco and stuff like that. Well, she wouldn't wait in that line. She said, no. She comes back, she said, I found these in the crafts department. They call them fuzzy sticks. Well, I do appreciate the work that she does for me, but here they are. I think they're meant for children to play with, but there's nothing there. But I wanted to clean the channels, but I can still use these for demonstration purposes. So you see here, when I stick this into the channel, it will come all the way out. That was quite a hole for them to drill, wasn't it? And if you look down here, you can see the pipe cleaner. And right down there, for that matter. So I have cleaned this channel, but the interesting thing is that there are holes drilled, and we'll look at them from the back side here, that go to the various bearings. Now these are the little wicks that I removed from the oil holes, and some of them were very hard to get out. As a matter of fact, some of them are, one of them for sure is still in there. I think I just compressed it and now I can't get it out, so I got to work on that a little bit. But I am replacing these, and I bought a whole kit here for 40 bucks. That cost 40 bucks. And there's all kinds of parts here I do not need, but I bought this for the square wicks and the round wicks, but I see there's some V wicks for the carriage. I will use those, but some of these other parts are for other models, but that's what I had to buy. So these are the little wick plugs that keep the oil from just shooting right on through and into your chip pan and doing nothing but making a mess. Let's examine these oil galleries one at a time. All right, let's start by looking at this hole, this oil hole right here. Now that is not a keyway. That is a groove, or like a keyway, meant to hold a wick. There's the wick that I took out of it, and a new one will be put in, but can you see that there's a hole right here? So let me stick a pipe cleaner or a fuzzy stick, whatever they call these things. I don't like change. Can you tell that I don't like change? But anyway, that oil gallery connects with the drilled gallery here. Boy, that was a lot of holes to drill. And if we could thread it through there, we would be able to see it here, or I could strike it if I stuck another. Yeah, I can feel it. Matter of fact, it's wiggling. I don't think you can see that, but so it connects, is what I'm saying here. So it is that oil hole that lubricates this bearing and this shaft. So the oil would lubricate this part of the shaft right here. Can you see that oil hole down in this brass bearing here? So that is lubricated by that hole that I'm sticking the pipe cleaner into. However, one of those little plugs is still in there, or wicks. I'm not going to be able to get it out because looking at it from this side, there's just no easy way to do that, so I'm just going to live with the old one. But the purpose of that oiler, of course, is to lubricate the shaft. I have no idea what this hole is for because it's a blind hole. I thought maybe it was to let excess oil drip out, but no, it's not. So I told you that this bearing is bad, and I'm going to attempt to take it out and replace it with a new bearing. And the reason I believe that they're using a ball bearing here is there just wasn't any easy way for them to lubricate that bearing. So they put a ball bearing in there, and I'm going to put a sealed one in. It's not sealed, so that'll be part of the video coming up here. But let me finish talking about the oiling system, or is this too much for you? Okay, the lighting isn't good here, but I've stuck a pipe cleaner into an oil hole there, and you can kind of follow that and see where that goes. Right into here. And so it is that oil hole that I just showed you that lubricates this shaft, and this ball bearing here rides on this little journal right here, and that again needs no lubrication because the ball bearing is supposed to be lubricated. I'll talk about the other end in a minute. Now I know I just showed you the oil hole right here in this bronze bushing, but of course there is another one, and it connects with this hole. I've already got the pipe cleaner, and I know you're not going to be able to see that. Oh yeah, you can see it. Maybe. Can you see that? And that's why we have a little bulge in the casting right here. So those also connect, but again there's a wick stuck in there. But it should pass the oil should pass all the way through. So that's all the oilers that are on this end. Let's look at the other end real quickly. Alright, let's talk about this hole that the lead screw goes into. Remember, there's a thrust ball bearing there, and oil comes into here through a hole. I get the pipe cleaner in the hole, and it connects up here with the oil gallery. Perhaps you can see, if I can position this, the end of it. Let me zoom. I know you're not going to be able to see it, but this oil hole here connects with this. When I stick a flashlight in there, I can see the end of the zip tie. I don't think that you can. Okay, let's talk about this hole, and it is this journal right here that fits into that hole, and there is an oil hole in there. I already got a zip tie in there, and can you see it connecting with that big oil gallery? I'm not done. And there's an oil hole there also that connects. So you can see that one hole depends on the other. And that is not a keyway, that is a slot for a wick, so that it would retain the oil. I don't think this thing was regularly lubricated over the years, and that's why we're seeing so much wear. Well, that's the end of my discussion on the oiling system, and I should have put this in extra credit because that ran 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to put a gear in this tumbler. I won't show the other one. Make sure that you lubricate everything. First of all, there is a needle bearing in these that has no way of getting lubricated unless somebody knows it's there and does it on a regular basis. But be sure and oil everything, and oil the hole here, and oil the just everything that's going to go together. It needs to be oiled. Now, when I took it apart, I put 2 little marks right here and 2 little marks right here so that I can hopefully get it together, and I can either put this in a press or the vise or just hammer it into submission, which I'm always leery about because of the possibly breaking the casting. How would you do it? Okay, now notice that my marks lined up from what I did 2 weeks ago or whenever it was. Now I need to make references like that. I go back and look at my old videos, you know, of 10 days ago. I look at pictures that I take along the way. I never could. I know that I have a bad memory now, but I couldn't do this even years ago without all of these precautions. I think some people can take apart the Enigma machine, you know, and put it back together without any problem. I can't. So that's my way of working around it. So I'll go ahead and put the gear in this too. You don't need to see that. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you how to drive this one in, but I did want to show you one thing here that can be a little problem. When you go to drive in your dowel pin, sometimes you just can't get it positioned, and there's not much of a taper on here. So what I did is I took a piece of soft 1/2-inch steel, and I just used this as a temporary plug to hold it in place. So it's in place now as I drive this in, and of course it's going to drive the other one out, or make sure you remove that before you drive it in too deep. But that's my system. How do you do it? Let's take a look at what's in this wick package. I bought this on eBay, of course. So there's a little set of directions here. There's the gasket that I could have used one time on the carriage. And I used Permatex, remember? So there's all kinds of wicks in here, way more than I need. So I'm paying 40 bucks basically for that. But some of these are square and some are rounds. So these are the little round ones, and you know, you got all kinds of other parts in here. And there's different widths of these flat wicks that are going to go into some of the shafts, such as right here. Now I am not going to show all of that because that would be just, it's going to be a struggle for me, let alone trying to film it, but there it is. And I hope, yeah, that'll be it right there. But I do know that once I put in that into place and probably oil it, it's going to want to peel out like this as I assemble it. That's why I don't want to show you all the frustration of that I will be going through. But I will be putting the wicks in, both the round and the flat, as I do this and as needed, but not always shown. At this time I'm going to show you how I install the plugs here in this oil gallery. Again, that's the old one. You can see they're just sheet metal, and this has been counterbored. And there was all kinds of white matter in there. It looked almost like white grease, or could it have been the original filler that they used that wasn't hardened? I don't know. But in order to make the plugs, well, I already did, I took a piece of aluminum, sheet, actually it's about 1/16 inch thick, and I punched out holes. Well, how did you punch them out, you ask? Well, I used the Whitney Johnson number 2 punch with a 5/16 punch and die. And that's how I made them. Now, if it doesn't work, look at my backup method. Well, before I even thought about punching holes, I had a piece of 5/16 aluminum, and I was just going to cut off tiny little slivers of it. But that's kind of difficult to do, so we'll see how these work. Because remember, a punch isn't exactly the right diameter, it's close, and I don't know if I'll need Loctite or not, but let me go ahead and drive one of these home and see what happens. There it is. Oh, too good to be true. I didn't expect it to go that well, especially on camera. You know, usually things fail when you film them, and you got to do it 5 times. Now, will that leak? I kind of doubt it, or if it is, it'll be insignificant, and if it does, I'll pop that out and Loctite it. So I'll do the other side now without you seeing it. You know, as you get older, you know you're going to drop things, you know you're going to lose things, you know you're going to misplace things, so I always make extras. But now, of course, I wasted my time, and I'll throw those away and see if you can hear the sound when it hits the wastebasket. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is to replace this bearing, so I got to press it out or pull it out. Well, I'm going to use a puller. I've already been thinking about it, and it is a new departure, 3203. Well, the one that I found here in my shop, brand new, is I think this is a new departure too. But it's double sealed, so I never have to worry about it. That'll last 50 years. So that'll be 46 years after I'm in the grave pushing up daisies. But it had a retaining ring here, which I pried out. You know, there was a special application. But this is a common size bearing. So I have to get the old one out, and I don't want to beat on it. I'm so worried about breaking the casting. Another thing, there's a cluster of gears that goes in here, and notice that this bearing is not centered. But I want to reassemble it with the same position, so I took my planer gauge and I took a measurement right here. Watch it not go in. It did go in. So that's the way I want to position the bearing. You understand what I'm doing? This bearing is right up against the planer gauge. I can't do it on that side. It has to be this side. Well, why don't you just measure the cluster? You're thinking, well, I can do that too, but there needs to be a little clearance there. So anyway, that's how I'm doing it. And I could mic this if I wanted to and make a little blah, 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 but no need. Okay, here's what I came up with. This is 1/2-inch threaded rod. I would much rather have fine thread. You know, it's hard to find fine thread and threaded rod, isn't it? You got to order it from the big yellow book. But anyway, so I have here, among all the washers and spacers and all that nonsense, I just happened to find this in my junk drawer, and it is just slightly smaller in diameter than the bearing, so it's just perfect. And then on this end I had to make some bushing and spacers, and that will go through something like that. Matter of fact, it'll go through exactly like that, and that goes up against the bearing, and a couple of washers, as I said, and a nut. And I'm going to very carefully start to draw that up, and that's why I needed a bushing over here and a flat washer to clear. So there's just all kinds of little considerations here that can drive a fella stark raving mad. That's why I'm crazy. See how nice that fits? I am guilty as charged of overthinking, but in the fear of breaking this whole cast iron ear off, I thought I need to support it here. And I even went so far as to get bolts in different lengths, but I was thinking about putting a nut and a bolt or some kind of spacer here to support it. But the reality is, as I start to remove it here, very judiciously I might add, I can see that it is pulling out. Can you see that? So you never know how hard a bearing might be pressed in, but since this is done by a pretty big company, it's coming out quite nicely, isn't it? There it is. Oh, that's a relief. I didn't break this off and have to throw it in the garbage. So there's the old bearing. There's the new bearing. This was a shielded bearing. You know what the difference between shields and seals? I'm not going to bore you with that. Sometimes you get bearings that are shielded on one side or both sides, or sealed on one side and shielded on the other. You know, there's a big combination. But who cares? But this is absolutely rougher than a cob, and I can even hear it. I know you can't, but that's a bad bearing, and there was absolutely no provision for lubricating it. So this is the original bearing that's 70 years old, almost 65, and it just needs to be replaced. Okay, I'm sure you know this, but it bears repeating that when you press in a bearing, you must not press in by the inner race. In other words, if you use this to pull it in, you could damage the bearing and ruin the bearing. So you need to use something that will catch it on the outer race or the outer ring, you know, something like this. So that's just absolutely perfect. Now, anyone that would do this or drive it should be prosecuted criminally. Well, that wouldn't work. They don't prosecute murderers, do they? Okay, this is the setup. I did oil the bearing just a little bit, but it's a pretty good fit. So I'm going to go ahead and draw it in. It's already started. Make sure it isn't cockeyed or you put too much pressure on the casting. That's what we're worried about, is the casting breaking. Yeah, it's pulling in nicely, isn't it? It's almost drawn in enough, but not quite, so I'm using the planer gauge here. I'll put that in there, and I'm watching right in here. I know you can't see that. You could put a feeler gauge in there if you had a notion, but probably no need. And I'm going to bring this up until I feel a little, oh, I do. I feel the drag on there right now. Matter of fact, I hope I didn't put too much on. Let me back that off. I think it's just right. I think I got it. I'm not telling you if I didn't, because I would be ashamed and humiliated. I'll take that out. Bearings in place. This is the first shaft that I'm going to put in that goes into that new departure bearing, but I need to get it ready, and in order to get it ready, I have to pop out this felt wick. See if I can do that on camera here. Where's my pick, Randy? Thanks, Randy. You can see that's all glazed over. So that'll pull out. And I'm going to make up a new one. I'm not going to show that because I know it'll be a struggle. And then down on this end, there's a very long wick. That has to be pulled out and then replaced. And also note here, the construction that they drilled a hole at the end to terminate that groove, which you might call a keyway, but it's not. This would be a very hard part to make because, first of all, it's hardened steel. We got a lot of accurate diameters here, including the bearing journal, which has to be perfect. We got a keyway. So this has all been ground. You don't want to have to make one of these. You couldn't. Forget it. Throw it away. I'll be back in a minute when I get the new wicks in place. As mentioned before, there are 3 of these round wicks that go into these holes here. 1, 2, and 3. So here is the new material, so I'm just going to cut it with the scissors to the length and push them in there, trying not to compress them. It's pretty hard felt. I tried to buy this at McMaster Car, and they didn't really have it in the sizes that I wanted. That's why I bought the kit. So I won't show that. There'll be 3 of them. I won't show it on the other side either with the round wick. Not much to see. Okay, I've installed a new wick right here. As you can see, already oiled. You have to stretch it a little bit to make it fit. And also, where is it? Right here. And the gear slides on nice. It was kind of tricky. I already put oil on them. Well, why did you bother to replace them, you ask? Well, I don't think you can tell here, but there's the old wick, And it has glitter on it. Not for Christmas really, but it's chips, it's swarf, that's what it is. Abrasive. So anyway, it's got new wicks. I'm ready to install this in this position here, which won't be easy because there's a cluster of gears here, a cluster of gears here that has to fit if I got that bearing in the right place. And as I add these gears, there are pins and keys, and they have to be in the right order, and that's why I put a little X on each one. Maybe you can see it. Yeah, the X faces this way, this way. Maybe you don't need to do that, but I did. And then the other problem, as I feed this in, this journal right here, which is really a press fit into the ball bearing, so that'll be a little bit of a struggle. Sometimes, I know I whine about it, but I've been through things like this so many times in my life that if it would go easy, I would be shocked. This might take an hour. Before I put this gear on, this is the one that has the tapered pin holding it to the shaft. If you understand tapered pins, you know that it'll go in one way, but certainly not the other way. And same thing goes for the shaft, so I have to line that up. Don't drive a tapered pin in the wrong way or you will spend the rest of the day pouting. Now as I work the shaft through into the gears, I have to line the key up with the keyways one at a time by just gently finessing them. But the problem is, look, I've already got some shafts sticking out here, so I have to start adding the other gears at this time. You know, I knew this would be a struggle. It's about a half hour later, and it's more difficult than taking the ACT test. So I had a little trouble lining up the key with the keyways, so I had to take it apart, and I marked it here with a red marker so I can kind of work it through. But you have to add gears here as you're pushing it through, and then I still have one final gear to put in there at the very end and trying to line it up with this bearing. So I will continue to struggle with this off camera. If I was a swearing man, I would have used every word in the naval vocabulary. Okay, all the gears are on. Not easy, by the way. Notice that the shaft isn't in quite far enough, because if you look here, I'm starting to line up with the hole. I don't know if you can see that or not. So I'm going to tap it just a little bit more until I have alignment. And make sure that I have the large ends up, and then I will be ready to drive this tapered pin home. Hallelujah! Get your hand out of the way, you fool! Okay, that turns so smoothly now compared to before. With that old bearing, I think I told you in part one, you know, that was where most of the resistance was at that time. So that's nice and smooth. Not an easy job, not for the faint of heart. 1, 2, 3. And this is the shaft. Remember, I put that in earlier. I don't know if I showed that or not. I was under so much stress. You know, I'm supposed to be retired, not doing difficult things. This one should be easy in comparison, I would hope. The reason I'm in such a bad mood is my email got screwed up and I had to change the password, and it was one of the most difficult things that I did in my entire life besides take the comprehensive tests for my master's degree. There we go. It was kind of hard to get the Woodruff key lined up with this gear, but it's in place now, and I'll oil everything up later. I don't want the mess right now, but this collar has to go on, and remember that that was double set screwed. I'll try to get it right on the original mark because I don't want it to pinch. Okay, everything seems to turn freely. Okay, next the tumbler shaft and the tumblers themselves. Remember, there's a double keyway here, and a double key. And assemble everything the way you took it apart if you can. Now I've already started the pin here, that bent pin. This actually should be a straight pin. Let's drive that home into the groove. Groovy. Now looking at it this way, make sure that the gears are in the correct position, as you see here. Take pictures again as you take things apart, and that will not be so bothersome to you. Okay, let's put the guide bar into place. Remember, there's a couple little pins there, as well as 2 screws. You know, I had people make comments on the threading here. If you look at the very bottom one here in the corner, it's 480 threads per inch. Well, there is no such thing. I don't even know why they put it on there. We are only interested in the 7/10 of a thousand feed because, you know, again, nobody's ever going to use that. We're interested in the feed rates. Well, Mr. Pete, what about this Gitz oiler? Well, no, I'm glad you asked. Well, you know, I've been saving Gitz oilers since time immemorial. I got a box of them, but of course, after all these years, the 2 that are about the configuration I want are the wrong size. They're 3/16 instead of 1/4 inch. That's a 1/4 inch hole. This one's beat up. This one, you know, I've been saving this for just the right job. Now, why is it painted orange? And I think this is the right job. I have been saving this since 1961 when I worked at the hardware store in Peru, Depot Hardware, and we sold Jacobson lawnmowers. And I scrapped one out, and this came off of the counter shaft on a Jacobson Lawn Queen. So that's why I said, but it doesn't fit. That was irrelevant, by the way. But I just had to get that off my chest. Look at that, doesn't fit. Wrong diameter, what will I do? You don't want chips to get in here. So I made a little reducing bushing. 1/4 inch OD, 3/16 ID. Where did I find that? It's made of steel. It is brake tubing is what it is. So let's see if that fits. I did put a little, and by the way, I wasted 15 minutes out of my life for that. Who cares? So I will tap that into place. Oh, that's a good fit. Now, if this doesn't stay in, I will use a little of the Loctite, one of my favorite compounds. So yeah, I will need to Loctite that in. You know, they should have painted them all orange at the factory so, you know, you could remember to fill your oilers. So that's still a little loose. I will make that fit when I paint this, if I paint it. Okay, let's take it for a test run. I don't know what position I have it in, nor do I care. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? I am thinking the job is about done. To prevent wear on your gearbox, if you're not using power feeds or threading, you're doing everything by hand, put your reverse lever into neutral on whatever lathe you got, whatever brand. That's really important because you don't need all of these gears and that lead screw running constantly and wearing itself out when you don't need it. And another trick is to just drop your tumblers into the, so they are no longer in position, and that will also stop many of the gears from rotating, but not all. And you got bearings here too you're trying to protect. When you shift your machine, if you have trouble, always stick your hand under here and do your movement under here, because it tends to bind when you pull here. You see what I mean? But it binds, it doesn't bind. And I must have shown the kids that tens of thousands of times when they said, this machine won't shift. Now, I had a lot of experience rebuilding these on the Sheldon lathes, which are similar. You know, all of these transmissions are similar in nature. And even though you will never do this, I think that I showed you many, many techniques, I think, that should carry over into your regular, everyday machining life. You can leave a comment if you want, and if you think I went through a lot of work, please give me a thumb up, because I did. But it was fun. Hope you enjoyed it. So really the only totally worn out part, other than some wear and chips on the gears and all that, is this thrust bearing right here. Isn't very good, but this bearing was terrible, so the job here really was to replace this bearing. Bearings are so important in whatever device you have. Remember that during World War II, one of the main strategic targets for the B-17s were the ball bearing plants in Schweinfurt, Germany. Once they knocked out all the ball bearing production, they couldn't build airplanes or tanks or trucks or anything. However, I believe that they had Swedish, Norwegian, or Finnish ball bearings. SFK, wasn't that? Or is that Swedish? Or is that Swiss? I don't know. But ball bearings are really important, and that's why the Allies, well, never mind the Allies, the Americans bombed those ball bearing plants to put them out of commission. So that's what wins the war sometimes, more than just shooting somebody and, you know, killing people. Get that. So, was that? All right, did you like this or not? I guess I already asked you that. You know, I got to go up and take a nap and get ready for my next idea. Tell your friends about this. If you know anybody that is interested in this type of thing, even if you're not a machinist, this might have been fun to watch. I don't know. It's hard to tell when you're sitting here like a 79. As a 79, I am a 79-year-old. You see, I'm getting wacky. Where's that Coca-Cola or that coffee? All right, I'll see you in the next video. I may or may not paint this, and if I ever do install it on a machine, at that time I would paint it, but you know how I dread painting, and so that's all that I have done so far with that Rust-Oleum Gray. See you next time. Lots of pictures at the end, too. Following is just a little bit of extra credit if you can stand it. Sometimes it's hard to shift your tumblers on a lathe. Now I can't really show you on the box sitting here, so let's step over. Well, just a second. Sometimes it's difficult to shift the gears on a quick change gearbox. The tumblers, they won't engage. They aren't meshing. Do not try to do that with the machine running. So if the right hand one doesn't mesh, which this one doesn't, turn your lead screw by hand, just with a hand, and you will feel it, the gears line up. For the other tumbler, if it won't go in, turn your your chuck, your spindle. You can't see that, but I'm turning that, and very quickly the gears mesh. This isn't synchro mesh, you know. That is a darn good tip there. I hope some of you take that into consideration, or maybe you already knew that, because I am a champion of the obvious, you know. So let's step over to the Atlas lathe, because shifting the tumblers on that is the same as this, as far as getting your gears to mesh and engage. This is really a good tip. A very short extra credit. Sure glad I paid 40 bucks for this. I used about 6 inches of material. The rest is gone to waste, but it's the cost of doing business. I know I said I wasn't going to paint, but for now at least I'm going to go ahead and paint the inside in primer the way it was before with Rust-Oleum red primer. Not sure if I'll paint the outside yet, but a good time to do it now after I've cleaned it up would be, and degrease, good time to paint it. And I don't want to spray it, so this won't take long. I'll just slop this on real quickly. No one will ever see it, and I really don't know why I'm doing it.